Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shaukatali.
And a very good evening to you and welcome to Newsline Zoom. My guest tonight is Dr. Warshi Dandeniya, who's a senior lecturer from the University of Fertilizer, and actually she's from the Department of Soil Science. So I'm thinking to myself that she does know a thing or two about almost a taboo subject, organic fertilizer. Let's find out, shall we? And a very warm welcome to Newsline Zoom, Dr. Warshi Dandeniya.
Thank you for inviting me to join today.
It's a great pleasure. I think the pleasure is all ours, actually. Now, let me get this right to you. You are a lecturer in soil science. So let me ask you, Dr. Warshi, how long, when you are looking at a plot of land that has, let's say, been grown with, for example, let's say tea, and we've been using various chemical fertilizers along the way. So if we now want to convert that to the use of organic fertilizer, should the land be sort of left alone for a while, or can you just make the transformation straight away, just remove one bit and then start using organic fertilizer, and will things be all right? Will it be normal?
To answer that question, I think stopping what we are doing right now, like chemical fertilizer application, and directly moving into organic fertilizers, if you ask that way, yes, we can do that. But whether we can get the same yield that we were getting under the chemical fertilizer application during this conversion, that is a question. If you want to get the same productivity or the same yield per unit land area, that would take some time, but this conversion can be done. Another thing is, if you want to go for organic certification, or you want to identify yourself as an organic farmer by a certification service, then only you can get a premium for the product in the international market as well. For that, it will take some time, because soon after converting a field that has been using synthetic products into organic inputs will not allow you to claim yourself as an organic farmer.
Does that mean that if you make that conversion straight away, let's talk about vegetables now, does that mean that until you go through a process, even though you're using organic fertilizer for the growth of agriculture, vegetables, then even though you're using non-synthetic, you're using organic, then does it mean that the harvest that comes up, is it tainted, or can you say that it's entirely organic?
That's a very good question. That depends on how much residues would be there from the synthetic fertilizer or the agrochemical application exists in the field. That is why in an organic certification process, they are looking for a certain buffer period. When you stop using synthetic inputs to the period that you are going to be claimed as an organic farmer, there's a gap. That gap depends on the nature of inputs you have been using and how contaminated the system with the residues. Usually it is like 3 years. There has to be 3-year gap in vegetable production from the day you stop using the synthetic fertilizers, synthetic agrochemicals, to the start of natural use of natural products. You have to use it or continue it for 3 years, and then there's a continuous monitoring process that is involved in the certification. And after 3 years only, you can claim to be an organic producer, organic farmer.
And so, in what of the harvests, potentially several harvests, in between this 3-year gap?
Yeah, so the harvest would be like, definitely we have seen everywhere in the world in this conversion, we call it the transition period. During this transition period, we have seen reduction in yield because the system is now changing. We have changed how we manage it drastically. So to to get a good production in organic production systems, it's not just about inputs. There are many aspects coming in organic farming. In order to assure that production under organic farming, the system need to be developed. Therefore, until the earlier that system that was used to chemical fertilizers and agrochemicals is changed in terms of the required biodiversity levels and other managerial aspects to match with the organic production system, there's going to be a yield reduction, and then in some fields people have observed that the yield gradually increase, and this transition period that you could get the same yield as under chemical input sometimes can take even 10 years. So it depends on the location, depends on the crop we are talking about.
So am I right in thinking that when you use organic fertilizer straight away, overnight, you stop today using chemical, tomorrow you start using organic, then what you're saying is that we will have a harvest, but the harvest may not be as much as it was pre the organic use. Would that be right?
Yes.
And
yes.
But what about that, if you analyze that harvest, would you find residual traces of the chemical fertilizer previously used?
Whether we apply chemical fertilizers or organic fertilizers, in the soil they converted into inorganic ions that the plant uptake. So when we analyze the plants later, we cannot differentiate unless we use isotopic techniques, we cannot differentiate whether this nutrient came from previous inorganic fertilizers or from these organic fertilizers. It is difficult to say. Anyway, if you take some crop fields in Sri Lanka, like around 20 to 30% lands in our upcountry areas, we have built up soil phosphorus levels. So this building up is due to the use of synthetic fertilizers. So that phosphorus will also be taken up by the plant, because for the plant there is no difference between an organic source or inorganic source. Because in the soil it will be converted to inorganic ions and then plant will take it up in the ionic form. So if you ask about the agrochemicals, other like the pesticide residues and other things, of course there is a period that if these residues are accumulated in large quantities in a crop field, there is a period that these might be detected in the plants. That is why in organic certification they are allowing that buffer period before one being certified as an organic farmer. But for chemical fertilizer and nutrients, we cannot say this is only coming from organic fertilizer or this is only coming from synthetic fertilizer. Because in soil, naturally, there are nutrients as well.
Dr. Warshi Dandeniya, can you tell me, if we look at it globally, what is the amount of organic fertilizer outputs enjoyed around the world, in percentage terms?
If we take globally, the global organic production, the land area under organic agriculture globally is less than 10%. And it varies from country to country. There are some countries where we can claim there's about 10% or nearly 20% land under organic agriculture, but in most of the cases it is less than 5%. In many countries it is less than 5%. If you take as a global average, it is less than 10% of total agricultural areas are under organic. So this includes even the pasture lands also, where we don't purposefully add the fertilizer.
I have some data from the World Bank which suggests that organic fertilizer accounts for under 1.6% of the world's agriculture fields, I suppose, which is far lesser than 10%. It's almost... Is there any country in the world, or let me put it another way, which country in the world enjoys the highest output in terms of harvest of really organic produce?
I would say there's no such country in existence. Let me give a brief clarification about the two figures you and I mentioned.
Yeah.
If you take organic farming in purposefully applying fertilizers and managing the system, there of course it is less than less than 2%. But if I told you, if we include the pasture lands also, where most of the which support the dairy industry in some countries, like when you include that land also under organic, that would be like around less than 10%. That 10% comes if you include pasture management also. If you have free range cattle, so some people include that area also to the organic farming, because we are not adding synthetic inputs there, especially in Australia and New Zealand, like other countries.
Exactly. So in New Zealand, although it is 10%, 7% is actually for their grazing, for the dairy industry, and the balance is from the organic industry, for the organic fertilizer. So that's put it out of the way. So then obviously the multi-billion-dollar question really to you is, on behalf of the Republic of Sri Lanka, I ask you, how long will it take Sri Lanka to get all organic?
If you ask, let me rephrase the question for you. How long the Sri Lanka can get to go organic while we are having at least the production levels we are having right now? I think that should be the full question. If we want to remain the same production level as we are enjoying right now and go full organic, it will take more than 30 years, I would say, given the current constraints. So if you are not worried about the production levels, that means you are not worried about the food security and our industries, we can convert the whole country to organic, no problem. But if we are worried about production levels, it cannot be done overnight. It will take at least 30 years. And also it may not be possible for all the crops and all sectors. Because Sri Lanka is, we are enjoying so much diversity in agricultural production, not like in other countries. We are fortunate to have so much of diversity in agricultural production systems. So we can enjoy many products coming from agriculture. So all these products, all these production systems cannot be converted to 100% organic. Some systems, of course we can, but some crops we cannot go for 100% organic due to system-specific constraints.
And Dr. Warshi, can you tell me this? Were you part of any group or committee that was consulted on this prior to the announcement that we shall go all organic?
I was not part of any committee. Yeah, I was not part of any committee that have advised or have been consulted before taking this decision.
Does that make you feel sad? Does it make you feel left out because you are an expert or you're on the way to being there and they haven't asked you? Do you feel left out?
Personally, I don't, but I think the professional bodies should have been consulted. Not as a person, as a person, they don't have to consult, but there are many professional bodies in this country established for many years. For example, Soil Science Society of Sri Lanka is there, and then there's Agriculture Professionals Association. Then there are different sectors have, like for smallholder sector have different associations. So there are many practitioners and expertise. But as far as I know, these different groups were not involved in the decision-making process. The key stakeholders have been missed.
Now, Dr. Warshi, I want to ask you this. I have seen in the city of Colombo several floors upwards, in a multi-unit dwelling, in short, in an apartment block, on the rooftop, I have seen brinjals being produced, guavas, turmeric, lime, mangoes, all up in the sky. And they're real things, apart from greens and so on. So if it appears so easy for a Colombo-based multi-unit dwelling living person to farm these things up on a rooftop, then I'm thinking, why can't then I'm thinking, well, you know, maybe His Excellency's vision of an all organic production country is eminently achievable.
Very good question, I think. So what we are talking here is converting existing agricultural practices to 100% organic with this decision on banning agrochemicals and the fertilizers. So while the system you are talking about is the urban agriculture, urban gardening that we do practice as home garden level. But if we think about such practices, you can see that the households that practice that are not satisfying their total food requirement based on what they are producing at the home garden. Maybe whether it's urban home garden or suburban, they are not 100% satisfying their food requirement only from that produce. We all have to go to supermarkets or to some vendors and buy rice and other vegetables for our day-to-day need in addition to what we are growing. So if you think the present cities I would say are like parasites. We have so much of people living, we have less recycling of resources within the city. All the resources are flowing into the cities from the suburban and rural areas in the country. So, but the nutrients that are flowing into the cities are not going back. We don't have that recycling system. So if you think about this present setup, under this present setup, the crop production in these rural and suburban areas is very, very important. So in our country, the commercial agriculture is mainly practiced in these areas. So if you do a small scale with a targeted customer in mind, we have very successful organic value chains in this country. We have established very successful organic value chains are there. So it is not a problem. But if you think about the large majority of people living in, if you simply consider Colombo city limits, how many of them have access to even grow something in a pot in the rooftop or in a balcony? Not many has that. So therefore, we have a majority who will depend on others to grow their food. That is why the commercial agriculture has been successful in other parts of the country. To run that show, we need to supply nutrients in adequate levels, and it can be organic sources, it can be synthetic fertilizers, and there are farmers who are using both.
Sorry, we've come to that time of the evening. We need to take a break and have a look at the headlines from the primetime news team who are getting ready for the primetime news at 9 o'clock. We'll see you on the other side of the break.
Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.
And welcome back to Newsline Zoom. I'm in conversation with Dr. Warshi Dandeniya, Senior Lecturer on Soil Sciences Department from the University of Peradeniya. Very good evening again to you, Dr. Warshi. And let me ask you straight away, what and how will the production of rice be affected by this overnight move from chemical to organic fertilizer? How is this going to impact?
In rice, if you think about rice production in a given season, we have about 0.8 million hectares of land is cultivated. For example, in Maha season, this coming Maha season, that is our target. So if we are thinking about the availability of the locally produced organic fertilizers are enough to support only about 0.3 million hectares. So that is also with so much challenge. So we have a big deficit, like in terms of the fertilizer requirement, whether it's organic or inorganic sources, we have a big deficit to support the rice production. Therefore, and also we need to remember we are replacing for synthetic fertilizers which gave high amount of nutrients, for example nitrogen, urea was providing 46% of nitrogen, and now we are settling for organic fertilizers which are providing less than 10% nitrogen. So the crop will have to grow with these challenges in the nutrient limitation, and we have a limitation in the nutrient source availability as well. So definitely, if we continue, we will have to face yield reduction with this current practice.
Yield reduction, in simple language, it means that you're going to have less rice produced, right?
Yes, yes.
Meaning, A, that you're going to have to eat less rice, or you're going to have to substitute it by importing. Now, when you import, from where on earth are we going to be bringing organically grown, organically produced rice then? Where are we going to bring that from?
We are not going to find organically produced rice brought into the country to an affordable price. The organic rice production is very, very small percentage in the world, and what we are bringing in, we are still importing rice to some extent. For example, the basmati that we are eating, it is imported. But none of these imported rice has been grown in an organic system. Like it is produced with a lot of chemical inputs.
Can we produce basmati in this country?
We don't have basmati varieties growing in this country. The Department of Agriculture has been doing some research for the development of varieties, and we have, I think, one variety closer to basmati, but it has not been released in large scale. So what we are enjoying as fried rice with basmati, it's basically imported rice, so not coming from organic system.
So we will have a shortage of rice, then we will have a shortage, because we can't import it, we'll have a shortage of fried rice because we don't have the basmati, and we may not even have the oil.
Yeah.
Is that a distinct possibility, or am I just being overly pessimistic?
Basmati based fried rice, maybe like if we don't import, there will be a deficit, but there are other like kiri samba and other varieties are being now used in the fried rice production, cooking fried rice. So anyway, we can expect, as you correctly mentioned, we can expect the increase in rice price and reduction of quantities in the market. Even under this COVID situation, we should not forget this pandemic the whole world is facing. And because of that, in the world market, the rice available for trade is going to be less. So the price would also be high. I think we are now, our market is reacting to this. Already we have started to react to this reality that there's going to be a rice scarcity in the coming future.
How imminent is that scarcity? When you study the stock levels and so on, and the harvest levels, how far are we away from a calamity?
We will face the real issue when towards the end of the Maha season. That we are starting the Maha season now in Ampara, and in certain areas we have already started the cultivation. And this cultivation is like, when you grow a crop, the nutrients need to be provided in right dosage at the right time. Otherwise, the yield going to be decreased. Now, in the previous season also, farmers had difficulty in not getting the fertilizers at correct time. Even though we had imported stocks of fertilizers and the government took all their initiatives to provide these fertilizers to the farmers, it did not go on time for many. So with this issue, by end of Maha season, we will face the scarcity, because until the Maha season yield comes in, the harvesting starts, there would be a period we will face this with real difficulty.
Which month is that likely to be then? We're now in October.
Yeah, December, January, February, this period will be very critical. We will definitely feel deficit, because our production in the past yellow season is less, and it's not sufficient to go satisfy the requirement until Maha season yields come, and the Maha season yield is also going to be less.
So, Dr. Warshi, sorry to interrupt you, because I'm running out of time. I've got so many questions to ask you. So, Dr. Warshi, is it a good advice for me and you know, the likes of Appus who look after homes and Gobis of this world and so on, for us all to troop off to the nearest place and start buying kilo after kilo after kilo of rice and store it, because, you know, it's going to get scarce apart from getting more expensive? What do you say? Do you think I should do that?
Very tricky question. It is like your reaction is the panic buying, and we have already seen this with the present price escalations. We have seen people going and buying in large quantities. But I think as the government, we should not create such a situation. We have to take maximum possible methods to ration and provide the food for everyone. That is a responsibility for the Agriculture Ministry and the government.
But talking to you as a professional in this field and who understands exactly the magic of the science, if you like, of growing and so on, soil and all that, what would you do as, you know, person who, I don't want to describe you as a housewife, but what do you do in your kitchen? How would you cope with all this?
As a soil scientist, I would think, like, if we are to adapt this 100% chemical fertilizer, agrochemical free agriculture, we need to create solutions. We need to come up with solutions involving the relevant stakeholders to assure the food production in the country. So that means we need to take knowledge and technology to the farmers to enable them to cope up with this challenging nutrient limitation and maintain the yields.
And so soil health registration cards and so on, and digitally used as well to identify location and you know, to get the geopositions and all that. Are they all critical?
Yes, definitely. Because if you think about the allegations against chemical fertilizers, is mainly not related to the technology itself. It is related to how you use the technology. We can say it's the mismanagement or misuse of chemical fertilizers. Same thing could happen to organic fertilizers as well. Even organic fertilizers can be mismanaged, and we may run into much difficult problems because of mismanagement of organic fertilizers. So it is very important to monitor the soil health and these practices properly if we are to achieve the objectives of sustainable food production systems.
Dr. Warshi Dandeniya, thank you very much for being on Newsline Zoom. Sadly, we can't hear more of your expertise because we've run out of time. But thank you. And that's the way it was on Newsline Zoom this evening. It's now time for the Primetime News from the Primetime News team. Take care and God bless you.
Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.